no veas, a Sevilla. Y al último que cuando ya salió la bien de regla.
It is Tuesday on Raid Shadow Legends, but you knew that on the fateful day of the 6th of September 2022 saw the introduction of a whole new champion optimization system into the game. With the Iron Twins Fortress came Soul Stones, from the Soul Stones came Champion Souls, and from the Champion Souls came Blessings. Blessings were, and still are, a bit of a mixed bag really. You have the blessings that are generally good, like Lightning Cage, Cruelty, Intimidating Presence, banner. You have the blessings that weren't very good and still aren't. Yeah, still no one's using Dark Resolve or Iron Will. And then you have Polymorph. But Polymorph, today, is not the same Polymorph that was originally added into the game. Maybe you weren't around for it, maybe you're just trying to forget, but for better or worse, for those that have stumbled across this and don't know what Polymorph does, I'll explain it. Polymorph is a blessing that, on a percentage chance, 5% at 1 star, 20% chance at 6 star, may resolve whenever the champion that has Polymorph has a buff removed from them or has a debuff placed on them. If Polymorph resolves, it will attempt to place a sheep debuff on the champion responsible for such. A sheep debuff will instantly cancel the rest of that champion's skill, put it on full cooldown, and turn that champion into a sheep. The sheep has altered stats to the champion that it used to be, most notably 0 resistance, 0 accuracy, and 150 speeds, and has no skills apart from being able to just attack with a very weak A1 that has a 50% chance of removing that sheep debuff from them. Apart from that, there is basically no ways to otherwise remove the sheep debuff from themselves, apart from it just ending on its own after 2 turns, or on the, as mentioned, coin flip chance after the sheep's A1 herd mentality. When the sheep is removed, however it is, the champion comes back with 50% HP, no buffs, and no turn meter. Generally speaking, in the context of an arena battle, being turned into a sheep is basically the same as an instant kill. They're not really going to come back from it. So now I've explained that, let's go back to how Polymorph was when it was first released. Released Polymorph was different in 2 very different ways. First off, even at 1 star, Polymorph could not be blocked and could not be resisted. Nowadays, that only happens at 6 star, but back then, it didn't check accuracy no matter what. Secondly, Polymorph had a chance to resolve every time you'd get a debuff, or every time they'd remove a buff from you. Nowadays, it's just the first time in a skill that you'd either have a debuff placed on you, or you'd have a buff taken off you. If it doesn't resolve on that, it's not going to resolve on anything else at all. So the rest of the skill will resolve on you. The next champion that also has Polymorph, that's a separate chance, but in terms of a 1v1 concept, I think you get the idea here. So, as you probably imagine, if this was rolling a 5 to a 20% chance for every debuff, or every buff that's taken off you, in terms of skills that remove all buffs or place multiple debuffs, the chance of resolving and the champion not being sheeped was very, very low. So if you think about champions like Ramontu Drake's Blood, Prince Kaimar, Madame Ceres, who has fallen off for other reasons, but back then she was complained about quite a lot because her buff strip wasn't a 3-turn cooldown, now it's a 4-turn, otherwise the effects are the same. All of those champions just straight off a cliff. They were suddenly basically useless. You were never going to resolve the entire skill. And people weren't happy about this. Not just because of the whole instant kill aspect, but because it was a random chance. So there was the illusion of a possibility that they might resolve the skill. They almost never did. So yeah, there was many complaints. Naturally, Plarium, in their infinite wisdom, following equally infinite complaints about this, said, almost nonchalantly, Raiders, if you don't want your champions to be turned into sheep, consider just not using debuffs or removing buffs from your enemy. Meanwhile, they continue to release arena-oriented champions who either do either or both of those. You know, if you're homeless, just buy a house. If you're sad, just be happy. It's as simple as that, really. So, polymorph on everything was the pretty default strategy for most arena champions for quite some time. There were some outliers, like how speed boosters would use Banner, or Rotos would use Ward of the Fallen, and obviously, PvE blessings like Cruelty, Crushing Rend, etc. And it was only with the announcement of the Ogren Tribe's Fragment Collection fusion, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Worm Eater, where Plarium finally clocked on that there was a bit of a problem. So, Yu-Gi-Oh's A2 was a full buff strip that also placed Weaken, to my recollection, and everyone saw this and immediately laughed him out of the game as useless because he wouldn't be able to resolve that skill. He'd just get polymorphed each and every time. I mean, that was what was going to happen. He wasn't even that good in the first place because he was overly specialized into being a Pythian counter. Yes, a Pythian counter out of all the champions in the game that apparently needed a counter. But, yeah, it didn't help. So, shortly after was the first and real polymorph nerf, where now it only checks accuracy. No, wait, it doesn't check accuracy at 6-star and only attempted to resolve on the first instance of being debuffed or having buffs taken away, like I mentioned before for anyone who hasn't fallen asleep already. So even at 6-star, this generally transformed polymorph more into a deterrent than a reliable countermeasure to make any form of debuffing or buff stripping entirely useless. Because now you were relying on up to a 20% chance to stop champions like Gizmak, Commodus and the like from wrecking your shit 7 ways to Sunday 10 seconds into a battle. And even then, statistically, if you're relying on that, you're going to lose 80% of the time. Speaking of Gizmak and Commodus, they were arguably the two most egregious cases of champions that were very blatantly balanced around polymorph. Either they got sheep before their kill condition and you lost because you had no carry anymore, or they didn't get sheeped and you won. Especially the Gizmak regarding his HP burn that can't be resisted. The champion would generally decide games before either player had even taken a turn. Of course, if you didn't insta-win a match avoiding polymorph, the champion you were using was not worth picking. It was that kind of time. Either you're worth dice rolling with polymorph because you won instantly, or you didn't. So a lot of other champions weren't seeing play at all. Now, over time, we've gradually seen more indirect polymorph nerfs to the game instead of direct ones. There was Shuzan of Valorous had an A2, which removes sheep from a target. Although that's all it did. It didn't do any other effect at all. So if you were spending a skill of hers entirely to just take a sheep off them, then, well, that's even more time that you'd bought. There was the intercept buff from the pinpoint set, although other champions did grant it. Lamassu, Wixwell. I believe there's been a few others in time. But the sheep bait champions were still generally just that. Until eventually, and you're waiting for this, the Chimera clan boss. What happened with the Chimera clan boss? What came along with it? Relics. And what was the one big relic that everyone was talking about at the time? And that's Wand of Submission. Wand of Submission as a relic had up to a 50% chance to reflect any crowd control debuff back at the producer, including sheep from Polymorph or from Armand's A3. Suddenly, Polymorph was no longer a deterrent, but now an active loss condition for the person who had Polymorph, because you tried to polymorph a target who just debuffed you or took buffs off you, and then Wand of Submission, no, you're the sheep. So suddenly, lots and lots of people were switching polymorph off their champions, paying up to 300 gems to do so, because, that's a thing. You don't get like monthly free resets or anything if you change your mind or if it's like meta changes. If you want to change it, then, pay up. It's that kind of game. And they were switching to Lightning Cage, which couldn't be punished, so to speak, and was the other way of making it so your buffs can be taken off you, and if you had like Stone Skin or Feral, a way to defend that so that you couldn't be debuffed after that. Now, the previous sheepbait champions, but obviously previously suppressed by Polymorph, were now able to run rampant entirely, including Nell Blackteeth, who later enjoyed the Arachnelixir relic from Hardwood Faction Wars, Carnage the Anarch, who previously had the issue of needing to run all of Pinpoint, Savage, and Stone Skin to be effective, which are all 4-point sets, so you can't run all of them, and then the Volcanos Fumor, that you've seen myself pick many, many times. To say that Polymorph has become entirely dead and gone is just plain false, as the champions who are let loose here seldom carry Wand of Submission, with the exception of Carnage, who has it more often when he doesn't, so be careful with that one. But they are still vulnerable if someone's rocking up with 6-star Polymorph, because it can fail in terms of, 150% chance. It's a 50-50. Either it happens or it doesn't. But you were seeing Polymorph a lot less than you were. After all, we all like hasty overcorrections, right? So you're probably thinking, I've gone through so much of this now and I haven't mentioned RNG. Why? Because, well, it speaks for itself, but that's all it is, isn't it? It's just RNG. RNG on whether the polymorph happens, or, on what skill when, whether Wand of Submission. It's all a bunch of massively pointless guesswork in terms of dice rolling. Some could say risk management, but really, it is just dice rolling. Risk management is just the smart way of saying it. Could be right, could be wrong. Opinions vary. Really, thinking about it, there has been other ways they could have balanced Polymorph or rebalanced it, but the main reason they haven't done so is because Polymorph shifted a lot of Soul Stones, and I mean a lot, more so than any other blessing in the game, from Plarium's warehouse into the player's pockets at a pretty hefty premium, especially given how there's that many souls in the game. The rates are pretty weighted and all to do with it. I mean, you can only need to watch someone like Pizza Boy opening hundreds and thousands of them and not getting anything of particular use, but that's another topic entirely. And you're probably thinking, isn't that the point? Just to sell something that is objectively overpowered and unfair to people who really want to win and gradually weaken it in time? Is that the same for everything else? Well, you'd be right. Even if it was spread up by the... Oh fuck, right, yeah. That was you give a worm eater. Why some gimmick fusion in the design trash pin that is trash bin that is Spirit Affinity HP Legendaries was a wake-up call. We really don't know, but that's what it was. Since there has been other additions, like the Mercurial set and the Total Guard buff, which does work against Polymorph, like how it works against everything else, some specific champions and skills ignore it entirely, like the previously mentioned Lamasu passive, that Assassin's Creed collab champion, who I forgot the name of, and some others. And in a way, we're starting to go full circle, as more and more champions nowadays have debuffs that either ignore block debuffs, ignore resistance stat entirely, or have other ways to shred ways to defend themselves. Some people have been switching back to Polymorph again to try and deter this sort of thing. You only need to look at even like this month's champions and how they have all these, this can't be resisted, ignores block debuffs, anything of the sort, to see why Polymorph might be making a bit of a partial comeback. It's still as reliable as it always was, that's to say, not very, but it has made a minor comeback in that regard. Although, ultimately, all things considered, on all levels except how much money that they've made out of this, Polymorph has represented an absolute failure for Emplarium, design and effect that fairly powered down what was otherwise intended to be an additional countermeasure to the speed nuke strategies regarding Ramontu, Madame Ceres, etc. that were rampant back in the day, and then warping the game's entire PvP system and subsequent champion gear, relic designs, all of the sorts, on a level where, for those that have suffered through League of Legends at least once, would have known that the game there is very obviously balanced around Flash, Raid has become increasingly balanced around Polymorph. But if there's one good thing that's come out of it, is that it serves as an example to every other turn-based strategy game ever made or ever will be made, as a solid example of something that you just don't do. It may seem unique at the time, it may seem inventive, it may make you a lot of money in the ways to acquire such, but just don't do it. Okay? Anyway, that'll be all. I'll let you go. See ya.